All right, class. Happy to be able to actually record a video for all of you. As I said, we won't be having class on Tuesday the 3rd. And so I need to finish up the lecture that we had. We had really good discussion. And so that went a little bit longer. And then you'll have a quiz based on the readings that you all had. So I hope you were taking notes on that. And then, of course, chapter 7 and 8 from the lecture. And so again, it'll just be 5 questions and it'll be online. And so since I'm uploading this tomorrow, which is February the 28th, you guys will have until the following Friday, March 6th, to complete that quiz. And again, maybe I'll do another video, but you guys know you have spring break. And then after that, you have your challenge paper that's due. So please email me if you have questions about that paper. On the 17th, you guys will also be required to give just a 5-minute kind of presentation of your main ideas, the challenge that you chose, your intervention that you developed. And I'll give you time in class on the 17th to come up with that presentation. So if you don't want to prepare it ahead of time, that's fine. But what that means is you can't be writing necessarily all of your paper at the last minute on the 17th, because in class, you'll have to talk about the paper for 5 minutes. So the paper is due the evening of the 17th, but you'll be presenting in class on the 17th for 5 minutes about your paper. And so I'll give you time in class that day to prepare your presentation. Like we often do group work and then you guys talk about it. You'll have individually about 5 to 10 minutes to prepare a short spiel about your paper. Any other announcements? Oh, some of you guys have been sending me your I voted stickers, and so you can opt out of any quiz you want when you send that to me. So tomorrow, the 28th is the last day of early voting, but you can also vote on the 3rd, which is the actual primary day. So really consider your civic duty, and as social workers, we're politically active as well. All right, so let me jump into the presentation here. See where we were. All right, I think I'll start here. So hopefully my screen is being shared right now, and you guys are seeing the PowerPoint slide. So we talked a lot about the different roles of school social workers. And so now we're just talk briefly about specialized intervention skills with families in particular. Remember, we talked a bit about how families may not have had the most positive experiences, but we know that children who have parents that are involved do better academically and for us, in terms of social outcomes and psychological outcomes. So we want to try to be the mediator sometimes, or advocate, helping parents to be able to interact with the school. And so you guys can actually, as school social workers, improve parent participation in school and thereby improve student outcomes. And so that may mean helping to create new ways of parent communication. If you're able to get in a recommendation to the administration to say, hey, how do we actually communicate with parents? Let's try to improve that. You may be able to intervene in between a teacher-student issue where a parent is related. So many different ways, but with families, we are really the ones that try to bring them more into the school as school social workers because we see the value. Foster families and children have a unique place in school. A lot of people don't understand any number of things happening with foster children and families, children who are not in the appropriate grade after having, trauma in the family or having moved, even children not understanding, well, hey, why are you 10 years old? You're in the 3rd grade. So things as simple as that, helping both the school and the families to understand what the expectations need to be, and how they can be better equipped to handle the special needs of this family. Same with immigrant families. As particularly immigration policy is really popular in terms of tense arguments and disagreements about it, but it changes. And so school social workers are sometimes the ones that help not just schools figure out how to navigate that, but definitely families. And sometimes that might be at odds, right? For you to advocate for a family in this particular way, it might be at odds with what the school thinks or believes. And so sometimes there are these cultural conflicts with schools. And so we have to be the ones to mediate or intervene. I think the example we had, the case about the students, Hispanic students who needed the week off. And so we were able to create a policy that says you'll try to be no later than a week coming back to school, but honoring those things. So cultural differences between parenting practices and the school's values may also manifest. And so we have to be cultural or diversity specialists in this situation. Groups, task groups, intervention groups. We may be the lead of a committee that is designed to study culture in the school and how to improve the climate. That may be one of the roles we have. Or we may be leading an intervention group, which is trying to resolve difficulties in students. So a conflict resolution group, an anxiety management group, a peer mediation group, lots of different specific skills that we can bring when working with groups of students. Classrooms, and remember we talked about the proactive nature of some of the things we want to do. For example, if we're thinking about bullying, we can definitely offer a classroom to classroom based training or psychoeducational offering. I think when we understand some of the barriers that we read about in those articles in Class Tuesday, time, resources, money are sometimes an issue. But I think some of you guys had recommendations of bringing in other people to sometimes do the classroom-based things where we can facilitate that, or we can actually conduct them ourselves. And then intervening with the school again is trying to facilitate that climate change, the cultural change in the school that may need to be more anti-racist, right? Be more supportive of children with trauma backgrounds or special needs. And so that might be something you can do. Students in schools are increasingly becoming brown and Black students. And so that's kind of the main thing about enrollment, but staffing we've talked about hasn't really changed. And so that creates some cultural differences that school social workers may have to help schools manage. All of these things potentially influence how a child does in school, IQ, family poverty, traumatic events, social skills, all of these other systemic things we know. Let's see. At risk, I don't know if the term at risk necessarily by itself describes what this concept means, but typically children that data or research has shown is going to be at a potential disadvantage. I think that's what at risk is saying. I don't necessarily like the term at risk, right? Because then we begin to see someone, and if we say they're at risk, we feel a certain way, we might respond a certain way. So we don't want to get into the habit of saying at risk. But what we want to do is say there are children from particular groups, backgrounds, socioeconomic statuses with certain abilities that we want to be aware that there may be some challenges. Similar with gifted and talented youth, labeling them as gifted, talented. I guess I just have issues with labels, right? Both the negative, like kind of at risk, or the potentially positive, because then you're creating certain expectations of how people interact with them. But if we just see them as children who deserve to be served appropriately, then we don't have to lean on the labels. So teachers may refer students for gifted and talented, or they may not. And so the school social worker, remember, we're pulling back and saying, how is, institutional factors, how are institutional factors playing into this? why don't we refer more Black and brown kids to gifted and talented, but we definitely include them in at risk? How is the school viewing and subjectively choosing a lot of these students for these opportunities? We may be the voice at schools to say, hey, let's rethink this gifted and talented and how we choose it's subjective and what measures go into this. Attendance is an issue. Students who are truant chronically or who are dropping out of school, we can try to be proactive in saying there's some early patterns, right? Before a student has missed 2 weeks, they've missed 2 or 3 days. And so we want to make sure that we're starting to, see that there's a problem early. So being proactive in terms of non-attendance, drug and alcohol use. There are vulnerable times in the schooling of children, if they're moving a lot, if they're not connected to the school, if they're new and they haven't found friends or don't have things that they're doing out in the community, if their parents are substance users, all of these different things are warning signs to watch for, and the school social worker can help, not only help the school watch for those warning signs, but look for different treatment options or centers once substance abuse in students has been identified. Kinship care is something that I think is common to talk about within CPS, but the idea is linked to family involvement in kids' schooling, and that maybe as a school social worker, something that you have to help school staff understand, right? Like, so why is grandma so heavily involved, or why are these extra caregivers involved, or why do we need 10 people here for this particular situation? And kinship care is particularly important for families of color to be more stable, to have longer placements if they're in foster care, to potentially be adopted, is having family involved. And so that goes back to the earlier slide. Abused and neglected children, of course, as mandated reporters, school social workers, we can help the school understand how emotional and physical harm influences students' ability to work in terms of academics, and so helping to promote some planning around work with kids who've been abused or neglected, so we can help teachers, school administrators to develop policies and just practices to work with these families. So abuse, neglected, sexual abuse is included in that. Adolescent sexual activity, STDs, pregnancy, definitely things, particularly if you're working with late middle to high school students, doing some prevention programming. And I think, sometimes schools offer sex education, sometimes they don't. So that may be, as a school social worker, if you're noticing high patterns of STDs or pregnancy, that you want to encourage the school to offer this programming or this content as an intervention. Parents who are adolescents are particularly vulnerable to having potential problems finishing school or persisting in school, and so definitely want to be there to support them in terms of integrating back into school, making sure their rights are being recognized and valued, and to assist them in actually kind of day-to-day planning and getting those referrals. The LGBTQ community is increasingly being targeted for bullying, and so that's a lot of where school social work intervention may be, and maybe within the family as well. And so, you're assessing with students in schools where the source of some of either their own internal anxiety or actual physical, emotional abuse is, and trying to intervene with them. All right, stop share. Hopefully this recorded. You guys see in my office beautiful artwork for my kids back there on the wall. So this is 7 and 8. Again, we'll have a quiz, and then you guys will work on your paper over the break, and we will have class on the 17th. And so I'll send some updates about next assignments, if there are any articles that you have to read, etc. And so if I don't see you before, enjoy your spring break. Be careful traveling if you are traveling, and take care. It's been a good half of the semester so far.